Minecraft 1.19 was announced during Minecraft Live 2021, and it will be called the Wild Update, featuring the long-awaited Deep Dark biome, as well as adding more immersion and beautiful nature into the game. They're doing this by updating existing biomes as well as adding in some new ones, with some new blocks and mobs to generate more ambience as you wander through the overworld. But what else might they be adding that they didn't cover during the official live stream? Let's find out. Firstly, by looking at what we do know that's coming in 1.19, and where better to start than right at the bottom, with the Deep Dark and the new ancient cities that were announced. We were told about the Warden during Minecraft Live last year, and we believed it would be coming out as part of the Caves and Cliffs update. However, Mojang seemingly bit off more than they could chew last year and ended up breaking up what would be a single 1.17 update into two parts, putting the Warden and the Deep Dark biome on hold until further notice. They said it was because what they were working on was very complex and would be worth the wait. And after seeing the footage during this year's live stream, I think they were right. The footage of this new biome and all of the things in it was amazing. So let's start with the Warden. The Warden mob now has a sense of smell and can sniff out players if it gets close to them, rather than just relying on sound and vibration as it did before. But it's not going to just exist or spawn in like normal mobs. If you want to find the Warden, or more appropriately, awaken the Warden, you must set off several SCULK SHRIEKERs, which are new types of SCULK blocks, which are activated by SCULK sensors, which in turn are activated by player movement or vibration. If the player triggers a SCULK sensor, which they can now do even while they're crouched if they accidentally walk on one of them, the SCULK sensor will send out vibrations to nearby SCULK SHRIEKERs, which will then create ghostly screaming sounds. And if you set off too many SCULK SHRIEKERs, then the Warden will awaken, which basically means it will erupt up from the ground and begin chasing the player. Now, we didn't get a very good look of it popping up from the ground, but I think this is absolutely amazing and very much something I am looking forward to witnessing for myself. And it will be chasing the player around an ancient city or a deep dark city, which are new structures that you will find in the Deep Dark. Brandon Pierce, developer of these new features, said he didn't want the Deep Dark to just be caves. He wanted them to have something more, and they have. Not only do we know about the new SCULK type of blocks and changes to the Warden, but he also said that in the middle of each ancient city will be an ancient structure that has something interesting for players to discover. So the other new SCULK block which was announced was the SCULK Catalyst, which causes SCULK to spread, but in a really interesting way. Basically, if a mob dies near a SCULK Catalyst block, it will be effectively turned into new SCULK growth, and depending on the level of XP that mob would normally drop, it will depend on how much SCULK will grow when it dies. The developers said that normally only player kills will result in XP being dropped by mobs, but with these new mechanics it will be possible to create XP farms without requiring any player interaction. I guess those developers have never heard of trident killers. Anyway, that all sounds amazing, and I can't wait to be digging down to find and explore some ancient cities and see what exciting loot they have to hide. One more thing about the Deep Dark and the ancient cities before we move on is that there was some chatter during and after the stream on social media that ancient cities are replacing existing strongholds where you find the end portal. This hasn't been confirmed officially, but it does make sense considering the SCULK blocks have a strong resemblance to the end portal frame, and in a recent 1.18 Java snapshot, strongholds had mysteriously vanished from the game altogether. I think that this is likely the case, and I think we're likely to find out more as the 1.19 snapshots start rolling out next year. Anyway, let's move things onwards and upwards to the surface of the overworld where the rest of the Wild update takes place. Lady Agnes said that they want to celebrate the wilderness of Minecraft, focusing on immersion and biome diversity, and they started off by explaining that the birch forest biomes would be getting an update to add more atmosphere. She mentioned that the birch trees would be taller where the light hits the ground, and looking at the concept art they showed, I can also see fungus growths on the birch tree trunks as well as potentially new types of tall white flowers. They then skipped very quickly on to talking about the swamp update, which was one of the biomes originally put in for vote in Minecraft Live's 2019 biome vote. This is the first time we've seen one of the biomes that didn't win start getting added to the game. Right from the start, Mojang did say that all of the biomes shown in the biome votes previously would be added to the game eventually, but so far, over 2 years later, none of them have, until now. So the swamp is bringing new blocks, trees and mobs, but let's start with chest boats. Chest boats are boats with chests in. Simple as that, really. They allow you to transport your items around on the water, which is probably not all that useful if you're just sailing around a lake, as is shown in the pictures. It might be more handy if you're travelling over an ocean, but I'm assuming you can't pick up the chest boat with the items still inside like a shulker box and transport them on land, which makes their usefulness quite limited. Having said that, Lady Agnes did say that rivers would be made wider as part of the 1.19 update, making them easier to travel by boat.
In Caves and Cliffs Part 2, we have even wider rivers, so it's easier to travel on water, so it's going to be like extra useful.
And whilst chest boats might not be too exciting, the mangrove trees look very exciting. They're a completely brand new tree and wood type with new leaves and, more interestingly, mangrove roots, which are a completely new type of block. They also seem to have some custom fruit growing from the leaves in these videos, but that wasn't mentioned unless that is the mangrove sapling, which is not a sapling. The mangrove trees will grow from a propagule, which is a kind of seed that you plant underwater. The mangrove wood type will have all of the standard wood variants, including doors and trapdoors, and the trees will often have vines hanging off them like swamp trees do now. The mangrove wood planks do look very similar to jungle wood though, however I'm sure that's likely to change as snapshots do roll out and player feedback is taken into account. One other thing that I noticed as they showed off the new mangrove swamp biome was that the water was not the usual murky brown, but a much nicer turquoise. There was another brand new block shown off as part of the mangrove swamp biome, and that is mud, which is basically dirt that's wet. You can actually turn normal dirt blocks into mud using a water bottle, and they can be crafted into mud bricks, which look great. And if you're short on clay, you can then put the mud blocks on top of a dripstone block, which is on top of pointed dripstone, and that will dry them into clay, which means we now have a renewable clay source in the game that doesn't require villagers. And that's all we know so far about new blocks, but what about new mobs? Of course, the swamps will be home to frogs, which will have 3 different variants, each having a unique colour and a unique item drop when killed, although they haven't decided what those items will be yet, as it's still a work in progress. The frogs will grow up from tadpoles that can be picked up in a bucket, and depending on the climate of the biome they grew up in, that will decide what type or colour of that frog will be. So for example, if your tadpole grows up in a snowy biome, it will become a snowy frog, and if it grows up in a desert biome, it will become a tropical frog. And they didn't mention what the 3rd type of variant was, but they did show it, which was the orange frog, and I'm just going to call that the swamp frog from now on. And the frog's favourite food is fireflies, or lightning bugs depending on where you live, which are a new ambient mob. However, they say ambient mob, they look more like a particle effect to me, as they are 2D and they tend to just float around the area that they spawned. And this makes sense, as having a swarm of tiny flying mobs could potentially cause quite a lot of lag as you travel through the swamps, so having them as a particle effect is a good way to keep the game running more smoothly. And that is all we know from the live stream. However, I think it's likely that over the course of the next year we will find that more of the biomes that didn't win the previous biome vote will be getting added. I mean, you can't suggest that the wild update will be focusing on biome diversity and then just fiddle with the swamps and the birch forests. I fully expect deserts, badlands and savannas all to get some love too. So maybe we'll see palm trees and meerkats in the desert, baobab trees, termites and ostriches in the savannah, and tumbleweed and new cactuses and vultures in the badlands, and who knows what else. I'm sure we'll all find out over the next 12 months, as they said the 1.19 update would come out in 2022, and that's as specific as they got. So I hope this means that we'll get a summer update like we're used to, but don't be surprised if it's closer to the next holiday season if there are any significant delays or issues getting the update out, because don't forget, they've still got to spend a few months getting 1.18 finished and then dealing with any bugs that that's got once it's released. Finally, a new mob called the Allay won the mob vote, which is a friendly Vex that likes music. If you give it an item, it will go off and find more of that specific item and then deposit those items back at note blocks that you've placed. And this sounds like a really interesting mechanic for item gathering, and the developers have confirmed on Twitter that it will be able to collect non-stackable items. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this, maybe check out my deep dive on the Warden in the Deep Dark for all of the reasons that it was held back previously.